Hi, this is Father Bill W. here in Austin, Texas, and I would like to welcome you to a podcast. It goes by my name, but what I try to do on this podcast is teach people a little bit more about spirituality, the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, kind of for those who are getting bored with the program or those who really want to go deeper into it. That's what we are really here to do. So I'm glad that you have joined us. We're starting a new series right now. And what I'd like to focus on is people who come into the program, AA, NA, CA, whatever the 12-step fellowship might be, who are faced with other challenges. It might be ethnic, spiritual, racial, emotional, things of that nature that present issues that often are not addressed. And many of you, I'm sure, remember the interviews that I did with my friend Paul in Barcelona on the subject of William James. And if you have not listened to that series of podcasts, I would strongly encourage you to do so. I think it opens William James up in a new way. He was important for people in early AA, certainly important to Bill Wilson, and difficult to read. And Paul wrote a wonderful book on that, opening that subject matter up. And I think we're going to dive into a little bit of that with this series of episodes as well. Paul is in recovery. He's also a gay man in recovery, and he's written another book. And Paul, the one thing I learned about Paul is when if he's got an issue or something going on, he usually goes and get his master's degree in that subject matter, so he can talk intelligently about it. And that's what he's going to do.
And then write a book, yeah.
And then write a book about it. So welcome back, Paul. It is good to have you with us. The name of Paul's other book is Paths to Recovery for Gay and Bisexual Drug Addicts. I will put a link. Yeah, okay. I'll put a link to it in the show notes so you can get it there and get educated on this. So, Paul, I'd like to begin with just telling a little bit about your story, your recovery story, and then how and why you came to write this book. What was your motivation for it?
Yeah, so I am a left-handed, gay Virgo alcoholic, and so I have like all of these. Like I'm a mess, right? and so I got cleaned up in LA, and then after a couple of years,
how old were you when you got clean, Paul?
Oh, I was only 29 back then.
29?
No, I was 39.
Oh, 39.
And
okay.
That was 2004. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I thought I wanted to become a drug and alcohol counselor. Boy, oh boy. And I did a really good program at Loyola Marymount University and UCLA. I did an extensive internship at UCLA in the School of Medicine. And of course, it was the David Geffen School of Medicine. And there was a pretty good focus on the gay community. David Geffen is gay and he's out and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of stuff to go on, and we had this death study that we did, and I want to talk about that in a minute. That was part of the book, and that was the genesis of the book. I did a death study which looked at all these people who had gone through the rehab, which I think was a 3-month rehab at UCLA, and we wanted to find out who's okay, who's doing better, who died, why did they die. And that's the purpose of a death study, to see, is your program efficacious? Does it work? And so that really gave me the genesis of the book.
But you had a personal interest in it as well, eh?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, so in my case, I'm more of a drinker, right? I drank way too much vodka for my own good. Right. And yet, when I walked into AA, when I walked into the meetings in LA. Two things were sort of dumbfounded me. One is the very high prevalence of crystal methamphetamine. And of course, there's immense amounts of public and published data on this. Usually by the third time a gay man goes into a rehab, there's about a 90% chance he'll be HIV positive. And so there was a huge amount of HIV positivity in the community as well. And so when you do these journeys of African American men, that number in the South, it gets up to 50 for African American men who are walking into getting cleaned up. And so very high rates of HIV, very high rates of crystal methamphetamine. I myself, am HIV negative. I myself never tried crystal methamphetamine, thank God. I did this book as an observer, but I do have a very intense story of coming from a deeply alcoholic family, struggling with drinking for at least 10 years before I got cleaned up. And being gay,
Did your father die from alcoholism, as I recall, or?
Yeah, my father and my brother. My father did. My brother did. And this happened in my late 20s, and I buried it all, and then I really paid a very high price for burying it. I paid a very high price in my 30s. On top of all the shame I buried being gay, and so I really had a bit of a crisis in my mid 30s, and that led me to getting cleaned up. And so I've had and I have several other siblings that are just going down the drain, I'm afraid to say. And so it is something that in my family there's 10 kids, and basically 9 out of 10 are alcoholics, including my father. And my mother should have been a very proud member of CODA. And so typical immigrant family. My mother was Irish. My father's family had come from Germany in the beginning of the last century. And so, this was, very much a Catholic immigrant, family in California. And
we landed in New York.
Yeah.
Same story, but in New York City. So.
Well, and you know what happened, Bill? You and I talked about this a lot. I figured my family was kind of a bug, in the whole American landscape. And what I realized when more and more stories were coming out in the last 10 years, maybe even in the last 6 years, about this overwhelming addiction problem in American culture, and you saw that in the last year of Obama, and the first years of so sort of the last year of Obama and the first 2 years after that, we saw, the life expectancy of Americans drop for 3 consecutive years in a row because of drug addiction deaths and alcoholism deaths. And so my family, I'm telling you right now, I truly believe that my family is a feature of America. It's a feature of terrible post-World War II PTSD that was untreated, violent alcoholism, an epidemic of abuse in American culture. I believe there was a runaway epidemic of sexual abuse in the 60s and 70s that is simply still not talked about. Because there's way too many people coming into the rooms. And in the work I did, I had to do hundreds of hours of clinical work and working with people at UCLA. I think that the gay men, it's probably 40 to 50% had some sort of sexual abuse who are in recovery. And with women, it's higher, probably more than 50, and could be as high as 60. And so this is something, again, that is simply not addressed properly. And I think this has to be a critically important part of people's stories, because there's so much PTSD wrapped up in these in these types of stories. And I believe it's particularly prevalent in the gay community.
And that's what struck me about your book, Paul, as I was reading it. So much of it is an excellent description of addicts, alcoholics from the general population, but then it's multiplied. The problems are compounded when you add other issues like being gay, like being having PTSD things of that nature that just compound the recovery process for folks. So these were the ones.
I think
that were
that's right,
studying.
Bill. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. In fact, when you challenged me to think about this in our notes back and forth, I was like, is are gays that much different than like the heterosexual population? Then when I thought about it today a lot, it's the gay experience of addiction and recovery is normal addiction recovery on steroids.
On
because
steroids.
there's a host of added issues, which I believe, and I've been sober a long time as you have, and I've been to 5 billion of these, get-togethers that we have. I believe the gay experience is materially different, and I think we should not be afraid at all about advising gay people to go to gay meetings and, whatever you want to call them. LGBT is what normally they're called, right?
Right.
There are men's meetings of gay people, whatever, LGBT, and so for instance, in the first incidence of family.
Before we get into it, let me break this down, because in Paul's opening chapters, he talks about 4 categories that he begins to examine. One is the lost family. Second is lost perception. Third is lost truth. And then the fourth is lost connection. And so what I would like you to do, Paul, is walk us through these relatively slowly and in some depth, so that we can examine it from the perspective of every alcoholic and addict who walks into the rooms is going to be suffering in these 4 areas. But then we'll look at the compounding that happens to the gay man who's coming in. So let's start with the lost family. All right.
Yeah. And so we know, basically, I mean, that there's been, pretty much universally accepted research that, something like 70% of the alcoholic's framework is genetic, right? So it's overwhelmingly genetic. This is a disease of the family for sure. And so, in my case, I am maybe not that typical, because 90% of a very large, data set, i.e. my brothers and sisters, are alcoholic. And so my family was, sort of like growing up in a blender on puree. And so, I when I went away to college, I say I didn't go to away to college, I escaped,
Right.
And so that was fine by me. I went to Washington, D.C., and and a lot of my family had already left, because my family was a sample of the time. Don't forget how much Vietnam ripped the American family apart. Don't forget how in that period post 70s into the 80s and 90s, a greedy corporate culture was pulling away insurance. It was pulling away holiday. It was pulling away benefits. Right, it was pulling away healthcare foundations. And so if you got hurt or injured or burned out, if you wanted to get, go back to school, there just wasn't funding for any of this. And so what I perceive in America is a massively burned out group of people many of whom are addicted in their 50s into their 70s. And this is a generation that's, being sort of the victim of this epidemic of OxyContin overdoses, right? I mean, and especially women in their 40s and 50s. These are the women who, right? When you don't have a safety net, it's harder to rebound, right? When an economy is trying to come back, the people with money can rebound. The people without a safety net can't rebound. And so every time you have a recovery, fewer and fewer people are participating. And that's what happened to American culture. That is what happened to my family for certain. I know this to be true, where I have had burned out siblings from injuries, repetitive stress syndrome, physical injuries from manual labor, burnout, and so forth. And so they just have gone down a road where it's very, very difficult to get back.
We value people on what they can do and produce, and not on who they are. So you're talking
Yeah.
about an endemic dysfunction in the American family that we're born into. Um, I was fascinated by the family roles. You mentioned this in your book, that people pick up on.
Yeah, exactly, Bill. So let me give you some examples of that.
Yeah.
So if you have a violent parent, what we do is we grow up thinking that violence is love, right? That beating is love. And so that's where this epidemic, the sin of Adam, where this epidemic of domestic abuse becomes prevalent in American society.
Mm-hmm.
It's where people learn to become doormats, right? Where they don't want to. They know that confrontation is going to get them in big trouble. It's going to get them a beating or a humiliated screaming match, and so
Right.
they just become doormats, and they will avoid conflict at any price. And so
Mm-hmm.
and some people become rageaholics, right? I have a brother like that, and so there's those three,
Mm-hmm.
right? Domestic abuse, doormat, rageaholic, right? Is where you can get. Now in the gay world, you challenged me. In the gay world, I think what happens with gay boys as they become adolescents and young adults is that they become the best little boy in the world, because they know, and they're thinking every day. I guarantee you, from the time they're whatever 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, every day when they wake up, am I going to get kicked out of the family? Am I going to get kicked out of my church? Am I going to get kicked out of society? So these three things: expulsion from family, church, and society. I'm telling you, don't tell me that this is not on the minds of adolescent boys and girls, when they're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18. I knew I was gay when I was 5.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that this is something that you just have to get over, because it's something that you wake up with every day. What is my father going to say? Is my father going to kick me out? Is my father going to call me a pussy?
Right.
Does my father really want a gay son? Right. And so this causes the boy to be the best little boy in the world. And what happens is we tend to do things 3 times better than everybody else just to feel equal too. And
Yeah,
that was certainly me, because
but it's never enough, is it?
oh, of course not. Of course not. Of course not.
No.
Of course not. And it leads to burnout. And you have that constant, that constant thing. And we'll talk about that in this disease of perception, that they're going to find out I'm a fake and a fraud and a phony. So these two things are working against each other. You have, I'm going to work as hard as I can to get a 4.0, which I did in virtually every year up until the end of my college. And on the other hand, I was like, they're going to find out that I'm a fake and a fraud and a phony. This is not a very good headspace to be in, as
Right.
you're progressing, right?
Yeah, that leads us to the second one, which is the lost perception. And that's kind of seeing ourselves as less than. It's the
Yeah.
inferiority complex that
Mm-hmm.
alcoholics and addicts, we present this grandiose facade to people,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
inside we feel worthless and
Yeah,
terrified
exactly.
that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
find that out.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And also, I just given this a lot of thought. I think fundamentally, Bill, you and I talked about this a lot too. I think fundamentally, the disease of alcoholism is a disease that tells me I am unworthy. It's a disease of unworthiness, that
Right.
my perception is so skewed that no matter what I do, I don't deserve a place in the world. And so you have that sense of brokenness, right?
Right.
We talk a lot about it in the 12-step groups. You talk about like the broken toy, or the I'm the Friday car. When I push in the cigarette lighter, the windshield wipers go, and then when you put the right signal on, the oil gauge turns off or something like that. And so what we get is in my sense, in my early sobriety, I had a sense that I'd broken something and no one told me I'd broken something, and I was about to get caught for breaking something very expensive, and I had no idea what it was. But I was going to get caught and called out on it, that I'd done something, that I'd broken something, and that was just a skewed perception. And I believe, you and I talk about this. I think we agree. I think there is a sense of that alcoholic personality, because I guarantee you, when I was in college, I was in a top program. It was a very elite scholarship program, and I got a 4.0 eventually. But I told my academic advisor I thought I was going to be flunking out, and he's like, "Paul, I thought you were doing really well. Where's this coming from? I'm very concerned. We need to sit down and talk about this." And of course, I aced everything, but I did not drink at that time. So I guarantee you that my skewed perception was going full throttle way before I had my first drink. And that's the old saying, right? When you have your first drink, boy, you needed it, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's where things get off the track, is that skewed perception that is part of the alcoholic personality.
You give a quote in this little section from William James, where he says how alcohol alters our perception, and for the moment we become one with truth.
Yeah.
So that
right.
that skewed perception that you're describing, when I drink, or drug, I alter that
Yeah.
perception, and I enter that land of wholeness for a moment. It's temporary, but
Yeah.
when people say, "Well, why the hell does he keep going back to it?" You don't know. Normal people don't know the pain of reality. So
I know,
I'm
right?
kidding,
It's exactly. And so we have that common acronym of fear, which is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And so yeah, what you said is so true. There's that short poem, which is, I believe it's in the big book. It's alcohol gave me wings to fly, and then it took away the sky. What we're doing for the alcoholic personality is we're chasing the first high. We're chasing that feeling of escape because the reality in front of me is unacceptable. And for gay people, that reality really is unacceptable, because gay people can often confront gay bashing, violence, legal consequences for who they are in dozens and dozens of countries around the world. That they can turn on the internet and they can see people being hanged in at least 12 countries for being gay. That's what really heterosexual people need to pay attention to. Say, well, you have gay marriage, you have all this stuff. What's your beef? My beef is, I just came back from a cruise, and every time we passed a Mediterranean cruise, every time we passed a country like in Northern Africa or other countries like that, I got a thing on my phone saying, beware, the penalty for homosexuality can be death. Well, so I have to go and pay attention to the country I'm going to and find out what are the penalties, imprisonment or death, in more than 90 countries in the world, almost half the countries in the world, for this. And so this does not escape gay people. I'm sorry. It's great that we have gay marriage. It's great that we have domestic partnerships. It's great that gay men can adopt. We have a long way to go.
Absolutely. And so the perception there is again compounded, you'd say, hey?
Oh, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Because we alcoholics hate, alcoholics in recovery, we hate hypocrisy, because we were hypocrites. We had to go out at night and be lunatics, but then we had to go to work in the morning and be like a coat and tie and be legitimate. Now that's going to be compounded, because with gay people, they're going out and doing things that are, whatever you want to call it, immoral or unethical or disgusting, or all the things that society calls it. And it could cost people their job. I had a very high security clearance when I left university, and I worked for the White House in the National Security Council. I had a top secret clearance. I had to leave that, because if it was found out that I was gay back in the Reagan era, in Reagan's second administration, I would have been fired. So I had to leave what was the best job I ever had, because if they knew I was gay, I would have lost my security clearance and I would have been kicked out. So that's the reality, whether you like it or not. And so these are the things that add up over time to say, you know what, I don't like this reality that I'm part of. I don't know why I'm being singled out for something that I am. This is who I am. And of course, AIDS was happening at the time too, and everybody was dying. 20% of that generation, 20% of the 1990, 1980 to the 2000 generation, right? The prime age group, 20% die, right? I mean, that is, 10 times higher than war, right?
Mm.
Right. And so you had an extremely large part of the gay population, especially on the Eastern Seaboard, dying from AIDS. And that was also aggravating. And it forced gay people to come out more aggressively. I think we didn't have any choice. And so that compounded the issue for my generation. I was talking to a friend of mine, Bill, about a year ago, and I said, I don't have very many contemporaries. I don't know, where are my contemporaries? And my friend said, Paul, a lot of them are dead. They're dead.
Yeah.
And I just stopped in my tracks, and I was like, holy crap, you're right. And so with that, process, we've made huge progress, but the generation that still lives today in their 40s, mid 40s to 70s, are still have a lot of baggage and trauma and PTSD
grief,
that
a lot of
needs to be
grief.
a lot of grief, of grief.
Yeah.
I have done so many exercises in grieving.
Yeah. Let's move on to lost truth, another section that addiction is a disease of secrets. We want to look good on the outside, keep the facade, but it's a life built upon lies. So let's talk about lies and deception. It was really big in my family. There's this emphasis when I came into the program was on telling the truth. And I grew up where one did not tell the truth. I got in trouble sometimes for telling the truth in my family,
Exactly. Yeah. And in an alcoholic family, you get very comfortable walking around in a big pack of lies. You have to get comfortable with that, because the alternative can get you in really big trouble. And so that's exactly right. And so there's two things I would point out. One is that, in the alcoholic family, it's a family of secrets where reality is the last thing you want. You want the secrets kept inside. You want everything to look good on the outside. And you want, the house, everything that goes on in the house, the violence, the rage, the passive aggressive punishment, all that jazz that goes on, the mental illness that goes on in the alcoholic family. Now, with the gay person, it's compounded, because that gay person then goes out into the world and has to be kind of like a spy, right? The spy is somebody who, right, is working for one side, but has to go out and pretend he's something else. And so that's where the stress compounds, where there's a double set of secrets, and that's all very exhausting and stressful. And I'm such a huge advocate for people to come out and tell their parents and tell their friends, because the profound stress that's caused by keeping secrets. There's the old saying I love in the 12-step groups. We're only as sick as our secrets, and I think that it's really important to come out, because generally speaking, our parents are still going to love us, even though they're going to blame themselves and make religious, weird religious commentary about going to hell and I'll pray for you and all that jazz. But generally speaking, I think parents do end up being supportive, and I think I advocate that people tell their parents, because it's going to make them a better person. It's going to make their lives lighter. It's going to make their life easier. And it's going to, over time, I guarantee you, it's going to deepen the relationship between mother and father. Guaranteed.
Yeah, well, it's an opportunity to live your own life rather than somebody else's life.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, exactly.
That's the distortion of the truth.
And now, and when it comes to church, I'm disappointed in America that sort of the religious right is dragging everything back. In your state of Texas, the whole LGBT thing is going backwards. It's going backwards in Florida. It's going backwards in Arizona, and now it's going backwards in Idaho and the Dakotas and Wyoming. And so it's sad, but I do believe we're going through a period where we are going backwards. And this is very unfortunate.
Absolutely. We're in for some tough times, I'm afraid. And it just goes down to really, what is spirituality about? What is healing about? What is wholeness about? You know, what is, as a priest, what is the Christian message about? Because I hear some of this stuff, and it's like, God, if that's the message, I don't want it, because it's the distorted message that's getting worse and worse out there.
Yeah, that's right, Bill.
We've got a lot of work
Yeah.
to do.
I think it's built on prosperity theology, which is if you
Right.
join our group, we will help you with your career. And I think it's built on it's built fundamentally on exclusivity and not inclusivity. And I think that the fundamental message of Christianity is inclusivity, not exclusivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Bill Wilson told a story about, and I wanted to get this right before I jumped on the podcast, but I'm sorry I didn't have time to do it. But he told a story about out in Akron, a man came to join the group. I suspect he was gay. And he said, you may not want to let me in, because I have a problem that's even more shameful than alcoholism. And Dr. Bob and the elders got together. They went in the other room and they talked about it. And they said, when on the basis of the discussion was, what would the master do? What would the master do? And they took the guy in, and he became one of the best members of the group.
And that was, I did a talk about this, and I went back and looked at the history. I did a pretty exhaustive look at it, as you would imagine. I didn't write a book about it, though. He was from the Chicago group, and people from the New York group remembered him, but they lost track of him. Apparently, he was a cross-dressing heroin addict, and that's like 5 checks in a row. And Bill Wilson was, 50 years ahead of his time. And he says, you got a problem with the cross-dressing heroin addict? Too bad. We're letting him in. How do you like them apples? And that's why I stick around, because, in 1968, there was a international convention, right? Or it was the GSO. It was the organization of the AA group that makes the rules. And the people were, and naughty, Richard Chamberlain's father, Chuck Chamberlain, was very much against having gay meetings. And, they were going on. And one guy just turned around and he said, you have women's meetings, don't you? Yes. You have young people's meetings, don't you? Yes. Leave the gays alone.
Yeah. And
it passed unanimously. That was 1968. Again, that was 40 years ahead of its time. This is why I stick around, because the foresight and the bravery and the revolutionary attitudes that AA had in that time, we got to rekindle that, man. We got to rekindle that. We got to find it.
And maybe particularly as society is retracting, as it is in so many areas now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. All the more, Bill. Exactly.
All the more.
Exactly. All the more. Yeah.
Lost connection. This is the final one. A feeling of not being a part of, a loneliness, a longing for wholeness. It's William James again, the soul sickness that pervades the alcoholic, the addict, and then again, compounded in the life of gays and lesbians and everyone who feels him or herself different. Lost connection. Let's talk about that. Not a part.
Yeah. So what made me write this was, so often we hear about alcoholism being the disease of loneliness, and I think that and of course it's not the greatest idea in the whole wide world that if you are depressed and and alone, boy, let's drink a depressant, right? Because ethyl alcohol is fundamentally a depressant. So we come up with these incredibly bad ideas about, oh, I feel bad. Let's drink a depressant and stay alone, drinking, looking out the window. And so So there's almost a predisposition for isolation and loneliness that is boomeranging out of that is tough, because when we do it long enough, it becomes kind of a default mechanism, and so we have to do what we can to get out of that. But I can tell you, I grew up in a very conservative Orange County, California. I didn't know a single gay person in my high school. And so high school wasn't built for being gay. The legal system isn't built for gays. The sports system wasn't built for gays. It still really isn't. Name me an out gay high school principal in the country. Name me an out gay fire chief anywhere in the country. Name me an out gay police chief anywhere in the country. Name me an out gay governor anywhere in the country. This is something that is still very problematic. And of course, what my mentor always told me, and he was gay, and he would always say that being gay is like being left-handed. You're always constantly reminded that you're left-handed because the world's made for right-handed people. Doorknobs, right? Punch ladles, frying pans, desks in colleges and high schools. Everything is made for the right-handed person. And so you're just constantly reminded that you're just not exactly fitting in because you're part of that minority. And so I think that's a really good analogy. And so I think there's no doubt about it. It's changing. It's changing very rapidly. I'm in Spain at the moment. Spain's, got a really wonderful, wonderful progressive government and a progressive culture that's very open and accepting. I think France has come a long, long way. Germany has, Scandinavia has. But the Middle East is going backwards. Asia's going backwards. America's going backwards. Russia's going way, way, way backwards, right? The UK is going a bit backwards, right? Canada's great. Canada is so great, And so a big part of the world is going backwards here. And it scares me that, I was talking with somebody who's a very bright guy, and he's like my age. And he said, somebody was saying, isn't it great that they're not putting gay people in jail anymore, and we're letting them marry and we're letting them have kids? And my friend just said, okay, these are the same people who were putting us all in jail 30 years ago. I'm just checking. And I thought, wow, that was kind of rude, but on the mark. Because, we were put in jail 25 years ago. We were put in jail for not very much in America, right? 30 years ago, right?
Well, we put more people in jail than anybody, don't we? I think in the world, don't we lead the world?
Yeah, right. And Hong Kong,
criminalize everything.
Homosexuality was decriminalized in 1997. I was living in Singapore. It's still a crime to be gay in Singapore. It's a crime in 87 countries, and it's a capital crime in, I believe, 12 countries. So we still have a long, long ways
and
to go.
Drug addiction is a crime. I mean, that's the way we treat it.
Correct. So true.
We'll imprison you.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Methamphetamines. A big part of the study was revolving around the use of meth by the population you studied. Is that correct? Methamphetamines?
Yeah, so that's right. That's what gave me the genesis of the book. And so what we did is we looked at several hundred men who had gone through the rehab facility at UCLA at the School of Medicine, and actually the School of Family Medicine, with a wonderful guy called Steve Shoptaw. He's just he's my hero. He's one of my great heroes. He did so much for the community, and he's a straight man who just has a heart of gold and a beautiful, beautiful guy. And he's done so much for decades. And so he asked me here, and he gave me like 5 feet of files. These are the medical records of everybody who came in for like a 3-month period. Go through everything and figure out what's going on, who died. So we went to the California state, records. And whenever anybody dies, they have to register it with any state, with the state of California. And so we found out that 9 had died, which is, sort of 8% of the group had died. And we went and tried to figure out a number of things. We tried to figure out what was the life like for the people who were HIV positive, what was life like for the people who were HIV negative, and what was life like for the people who died. And it was a really interesting eye-opener, and it ended up being published in a study at UCLA was that, more than half of the guys who died were bipolar.
Mm.
And Steve was like, whoa, this is a big deal, because, he said bipolar is a killer. And one of the questions, as you know, a lot of these papers, they raise more questions than they answer, which is sort of the purpose. But you have to ask yourself, did the bipolar kill the addict, or did the drugs kill the addict? I think this is a very important question to ask. A lot of them were already, by the time they were 13 or 14 years old, they were already going down the drain with heavy drugs. Besides alcohol, marijuana, they were already getting criminal records. And so this is where, the interventions for high school become so important for the marginal, is to keep them out of jail and get them, on a better path. And also, Bill, the one thing that I was so struck by, first of all, Steve was like very upset. He was very sad, and he's like, nine died. And I said, Steve, I went through every single one of these medical records, every single page. I'm amazed that like 35 didn't die.
Yeah.
Because these guys were almost on their last legs. Because why? They were trying every drug under the heavens, right? And so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here where people are coming in to try to get cleaned up in 12-step groups, especially in the gay community, and they are having 1, GHB, 2, heroin, 3, Viagra, 4, crystal methamphetamine, 5, ketamine, 6, ecstasy, 7, any form of downers to sleep. So you're looking not at getting cleaned up in one thing called, CMA, crystal methamphetamine anonymous. You're looking at getting cleaned up on at least 5 different drugs, right? And, does AA have the capacity to do that? I would submit to you, probably not.
Right.
I would submit to you that you probably have to think about, these guys, you got to find some programs in America. We need a domestic Peace Corps. I've been saying that for years. You need a domestic Peace Corps in America for drug addiction. This is what you need. Put all these people who are not working into like a 6-week training course and do a domestic Peace Corps, and have 3-month facilities for all these colleges that are going to go bust, pretty soon. And have 3-month facilities for all these people who need to get cleaned up. People need to be taken out of society for 3 months when they have had drugs this strong.
Yeah.
And crystal methamphetamine causes brain damage, right? It causes extensive brain damage, which can take many, many months to
what is it about crystal meth that is particularly attractive for the gay population?
Well, I always say that if the gays hadn't, if it wasn't around, the gays would have invented it, because it goes to all the heart of the gay stuff. It gives you courage. It takes away your shame. It takes away all the inhibition. It makes all of the rumination go away. It makes all of the concern about HIV go away. And it's a sex drug. It's a sex drug. So you can have sex romps, and of course it gives you energy. It makes you lose weight. So I just gave you like 7 reasons why, and you got gay men in their late 40s and early 50s who want to take a few pounds off, and they want to feel young again. They want to party with the right group. So they start taking it. And then, whatever, a year later, they're missing their teeth and they weigh 110 pounds, and they've lost their job and their car and everything else, right? Their whole set of keys is gone. And then of course, poppy is heroin, right? Alcohol comes from whatever, potatoes and wheat, right? And whiskey and all these other stuff comes from rye, and cocaine comes from coca. Crystal methamphetamine, it comes from essentially 2 ingredients, which is cough syrup and industrial detergent. Right? Or cough syrup and radiator fluid. And these chemicals they're chemicals. They're not naturally occurring, and they burn. They cause it's a burn. You get first or second degree burns in the areas between your nerves and those axon and dendrites that are sending out signals. And when these are burned, when your body's trying to produce endorphins after you've done a race, or you've gotten an A, or you've done something really great that people are proud of. Your body is not registering anything, so there's a flatlining event that can take months to recover from, and that's why these people need to be sort of taken out, and given a 3-month sort of facility where they can get all their senses back and let their brains heal. And I think without that, I think the burden on the 12-step program is problematic, and I think there has to be greater osmosis between between the 12-step programs and the outside world, a lot more osmosis, and we can't just say this is an outside issue. That's bullshit,
Right.
It becomes critically important for this. And I think also, that I do think that the discovery that most of the men who died were bipolar. If I've sponsored people who are bipolar, I would say if you don't treat the bipolar, you're completely wasting your time in a 12-step program. You're wasting your time, right? The bipolar has to be treated outside by a competent therapist or a psychiatrist with medication, and then the other stuff can kick in. But if these other issues aren't, if we aren't candid about those other issues in the 12-step groups, we're kidding ourselves.
Right. And if we think the 12 steps magically are going to cure everything, we're making things worse. Well, Paul, you've given us a lot to think about here. It's been fascinating. I want to dig in a little bit deeper next time to PTSD, the sexual trauma issues, because that's pretty common amongst the gay population, that they got injured early in many cases, not in all, but in many cases. So
yes, sir. Yeah.
We will start looking at that. And again, William James, relevant as ever, isn't he?
No, he comes up all over the place. I know. Yeah.
Relevant as ever. The sick souls out there that he diagnosed more than 100 years ago. And
Bill, I went to a talk on psychedelics for the World Economic Forum in Davos, and interestingly, William James came up.
No kidding.
Yeah. No, it was like, cool.
There's our boy.
Yeah.
There's our boy. Yeah. Never ends. Well, Paul, thank you once again. It was really, really helpful. Just getting us going with this thing, and I will look forward to visiting with you again next week. Okay. And thank you.
And thank you for laying it all out so nicely. That was so great the way you did it.
Well, yeah, I think we have to be sensitive to all of the issues that people bring into 12-step recovery. You said an important thing, the pornography that's out there today, the availability of drugs that are out there today. We're screwing ourselves up royally early, and I'm
afraid so. Yeah, I'm afraid that's right. Yeah. So people, young kids that by the time people are 13, 14, they've already fetishized sex before they've had an intimate relationship with a boy or a girl, as one example. They may have already tried hard drugs by the time they're 13, 14, or 15. They may have already tried speed or crystal methamphetamine, on and on, right? And so these are where, adolescents whose brains are developing up to the age of like 22, 23 are already doing damage. And of course, and this leads to high degrees of anxiety. Anxiety is an epidemic with the Gen Z. My Gen Z interns are anxiety, just balls of anxiety. Mm-hmm. I'm blown away. I have a lot of interns that are like, 20 to 25, and the Gen Zs are just indecisive and anxious and afraid to make decisions, afraid of consequences. Man, oh man, I see it all over the place.
Well, and this to me is why offering insights into the 12-step program that take people deeper into the psychology and the spirituality are going to be so critical. you know, it just
Yeah,
can't be the same old, you know, meetings, you know,
yeah,
it's got to
yeah.
be a journey to wholeness.
Yeah,
And
that's right. That's right. And in the book, there's a lot of solutions all over the place in the book. So
good.
you and I are laying out the fundamental issues, and there's a lot of solutions later on.
All right.
But,
We will get to the hope next time.
Okay. Much love, Bill.
Thank you.
Much love in Austin. Okay.
All right.
Have a
Thank
great
you all
night.
for
Bye.
listening. God bless and keep
Thanks.
coming back.